Hey guys, and welcome to my YouTube channel ESP. I'm Daniella.Energ, and today I'll be talking to you guys about how I was able to get straight A's my very first semester of college. So with this video, no matter who you are, whether you're the type who doesn't procrastinate or you're someone who does procrastinate like I do, getting A's is possible. Before you start thinking just about how credible my advice actually is, for my first semester of college, I took 5 courses, which is 15 hours, all A's, and ended up with a 3.8 GPA. However, I did all of this without using a textbook for most of my classes, and in addition to that, being a major procrastinator. Just last year in high school, I graduated in the top 1% of my class, which had about 1,000 kids, and graduated with a 3.9 GPA. Anyways, with all that being said, let's get to it. The first tip is to make a digital to-do list and a digital calendar. Since we all live in such a digital age, and most of us have our phones on us, if not all the time, you might as well optimize and utilize the digital calendar that you have on your phone in addition to the memo or note app as well. You see, with me, I prefer to have a digital version of what it is that I have to do, because knowing myself, I tend to forget physical copies of things, so I would much rather have something that is digital, which will be on me more likely than something that is not. Anyways, as soon as you get your syllabus from either your high school or your university, college, for each specific class, go ahead and jot down all the assignments, extra credit, essays, and exams that are due. If the syllabus doesn't necessarily tell you of the things of when they are due, then make sure that when the teacher or professor says that something is due, that you immediately pull out your phone and jot down that information so you won't forget later on. And with me, I actually sometimes like to lie to myself of when certain things are due, such as, let's say that it's due on this specific date. However, instead of saying that it is due on that date within my digital calendar, I'll say that, oh, it's due this day or even another day before that, which makes me less likely to procrastinate and ultimately forget about the assignment altogether. So the next tip that I have is creating quiz and test reviews. When I create quiz and test reviews, I tend to do so a couple of days right before of when it actually occurs. The reason why I do it a couple of days before rather than way before is because, especially in college where classroom sizes tend to be a lot bigger, it is more than likely that someone has already created the majority, or if not completed, the whole entire review. Which means that all that you have to do then is to copy and paste the material that they have already researched, and then to just study from there. Also, here's a quick tip about copying and pasting material. Make sure that when you paste in material that you use, if you have a Windows computer, Control-Shift-V, and then if you have a Mac computer, it's Command-Shift-V. This will help you paste in information without the formatting, which means that it won't give you some wonky font that doesn't match up with the font that you're already using within your document. Also, with my notes, I tend to keep them all digital. The reason why I keep my notes all digital is because it's a lot easier to organize them. Such as if you keep them digital, you can alphabetize certain terms that you need to memorize. And also by keeping your notes digital, you can use Control-Find to find certain content within your review instead of having to skim over physical page after physical page. Also with digital notes, it would really help you if you go ahead and incorporate the content from quizzes, assignments, and test exams into your overall quiz or test review, because a lot of times, like especially from my experience with college, professors tend to incorporate content that was previously used on some other assignment or quiz. So type that into your review, whether those are questions that you missed altogether or you simply guessed on. Also, I think that it would really help you out if you go ahead and use Google Drive and Google Documents to organize and compile your assignments and reviews. And make sure that with Google Documents for important content such as essays and test reviews, that you go ahead and set it to offline mode so that you can also have access to it even if you're not on the internet. In addition to all this with Google Documents, you should also consider sharing a Google document with a trusted friend who's taken the same class or course as you, so that you all can evenly divide the contents of the review, which means that there will be less work for you to do and more time for you to actually study the content. So the next tip are memorization technique. Now with memorization, it can be exceptionally challenging to memorize information into your head, especially if you are studying at the last minute. So what I do to help myself with memorizing content is that I not only speak out loud to myself, but that I also speak of the content in a funny or provocative way. For instance, let's say that you are studying for, say, US history, and you're having trouble with memorizing which president in particular was responsible for ordering the dropping of the atomic bomb during World War II. So with me, my provocative way of memorizing such a thing would be by answering with Harry asked Truman. I know it sounds bad. Also, another memorization technique, especially if it's one that has like several steps to it, is to create an acronym. Just as how there is PEMDAS to remind you the order in mathematics, I do the same exact thing with other subjects as well. For instance, for my performance of literature class, I had to memorize the 4 sequencing patterns, which were perceptual, temporal, argumentative, and ritualistic. So what I did was rearrange the 4 words by their first letter and came up with TRAP, trap, which already is a word that I easily can remember to reference to since I do tend to listen to trap music. Anyways, also another memorization technique is that after my notes have been already typed up into my computer, I go ahead and speak them out loud and record myself. So the trick to recording yourself speaking your notes is to say it in a very rhythmic manner, as if it were like a spoken word, poetry, or a song. I figure that with me, I might as well do this because I have no trouble with memorizing a song or a spoken word or poetry just like that. So if I were to approach my notes and my studies in the same manner, it would help me to memorize the content faster. Now, if your study guide or your test review is exceptionally long, for instance, I had one exam that had 18 pages worth of review content, instead of you speaking the whole review in its entirety, what you would do instead would be to just record the content of the review that you still are not quite sure about, and to leave out the content that you already know like the back of your hand. Okay, so the 5th tip is about lecture PowerPoints, listening to the professor, and recording the professor. Now, if your university is anything like mine, the majority of the lectures are mainly led by the good old-fashioned Microsoft Office PowerPoint. In my classes, many people would bring their laptops and type as the professor was speaking. However, with me, I rarely ever brought my notebook or anything for that matter to write down information. Instead, all I had with me was my purse, my 99-cent Arizona tea, and my good old-fashioned smartphone. The reason why I prefer doing this is because I know myself very well. I know my tendencies and what I should be working on. Such as if I were to bring my laptop, I would more than likely be distracted and start working on some other work for a different class, or just looking up a random YouTube video. And also with bringing my notebook, again, I would be distracted because when I have a pen and paper in front of me, I tend to just doodle away with little anime characters, and before I know it, the class is over and I didn't learn a thing. So yeah, to free myself from any potential distraction, I just tone all of my attention into the professor or the teacher, and when certain slides come up that have information that I need to reference to later, I simply use my phone to take a picture of it, and in class I make sure to always have my phone upside down so that I won't be distracted by what's on it. So the 6th tip that I have is to consider taking online courses. If you are someone who procrastinates a lot, then taking maybe 1 or even 2 online courses may be right for you because you have more flexibility with your time, since quizzes and exams may be open online for several days. Plus, with my experience from taking online courses, is that quizzes tend to give you multiple attempts, like 2 or maybe even 3, meaning that you have another chance at getting a higher grade, whereas compared to physical classes, you tend to have only 1 chance in one given time to get the work done. The next tip that I have is about tutoring and teacher assistant TA sessions, especially at times of when it was right before the exam or the final exam. So yeah, you really should consider utilizing your teacher assistants students, because generally the TAs in college are those who have already taken the course before, so they already know what the professor is looking for as far as like essays and exams and quizzes. Also, if you are someone who tends to skip out on classes every now and then or the majority of the time, then really consider going to these TA sessions, because you got to understand that those exams and those final exams weigh so much on your final grade, so you want to at least do your very best on those, even if you weren't in the class the majority of the time. The next tip is about doing as much extra credit as possible. This is so very important. You see, I used to think that in college they didn't really offer any extra credit. I thought it would just end with high school. But if you're lucky like I was, and some professors may actually offer extra credit. Out of all 5 courses that I took this semester, 3 of them offered extra credit. And honestly, had I not done all the extra credit for one class in particular, I would have ended up with like an 88 or 89 instead of a 92. Do all the extra credit that that class has to offer. It really does help bump up your grade. I would say even more so in college than it did in high school. The next tip that I have is to be very familiar with your teacher, your professor, your teacher's assistant. Go ahead and make an effort to email and or physically talk to your TA or your professor every so often. You want to try and create a relationship with them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to kiss up to them or anything. The very minimum that you want to do is to make sure that they are familiar with your face and your name, because from my personal experience, if you do that, then they are more likely to give you more time for a certain assignment or even a grade curve and turn that 89 into a 90 or that 69 into a 70. I hope you like this video. Please go ahead and do all this stuff right here. It will really help my channel out and encourage me to create more content like this. And to all the procrastinators out there, such as myself, I am rooting for you. You got this. Getting A's is possible even if you study at the very last minutes. Also, my next video will actually tie into this one and we'll talk about college hacks. So yeah, look forward to that. And also go ahead and check out my other videos, which will be here. They talk about free money, meaning scholarships. And that's just about it. I'm Daniella.Energ, and see you sometime later this month because my posts have never been fairly consistent. Anyways, bye.